Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil kareem. I'm Junaid Qadir. I am the director of the Ihsan Lab at the Information Technology University. And in this introductory lecture, I'm going to introduce the outline of this short course of mini lectures on writing well. In this set of mini lectures, we shall be talking about 6 steps on bringing clarity to academic technical writing. So this applies to all engineering students and computer science students, and broadly to other students who are interested in technical writing. So although these set of lectures are related to writing, but we'll be talking at a high level. We shall not be talking too much about low level stuff. So let me talk about the 6 things I'll be talking about. So let me show you the list. The first point is that we should write top down. We should always focus on communicating the big picture of whatever topic we are working on or whatever research we are presenting. The second thing is that we should write in a way that has flow. So this is an abstract notion that describes that there should be connection between the various parts of your paper. And many a times, papers that do not have good flow, you will find that those papers are very difficult to read. The third thing that I shall talk about is the concept of coherence, the relatedness of the different parts of the paper to some thematic unity. There should be a big picture, there should be a big idea from which emerges all of the concepts. So you should write in a way that is coherent. Fourth thing is that you should have empathy. In other words, when you are writing or whenever you are communicating, you should be keeping an eye out on what the receiver would feel like, and you adapt your message accordingly. The fifth thing is to talk about the design. So already computer science students, they study design. It's a big part of human computer interaction. Similarly, when we are talking of academic writing, it's important to have empathy, the point that we covered last, and also to use the good design patterns that people have found, and use consistency and other design principles to write well. Finally, we shall be talking about style or adding flair to your writing. You should be knowing that writing is an ancient art, and from very old times, people have been talking about rhetoric, about persuading people. Those ideas apply to writing as well. So there are many things that experts have proposed. So the first 5 things are obviously getting the basics right. And then in the 6th point, we can talk about how we can add flair, how we can ensure that our writing is not verbose, it is not belabored, it is active, vigorous, it persuades people. So these ideas and some good references on these topics I will be introducing in the 6th part. So let me briefly again talk about these items, because I will be recording all 6 mini lectures separately. So just let me again describe the 6 parts, and then we shall have the mini lectures. So to motivate all of this, we need to understand that academic writing is something germane to scholarly research. Most of you who are research students would be having this job of reading papers, but you will often find that many research papers are difficult to read. If I were to ask you how many papers you've read, and then if I were to ask you how many papers you found yourself flustered on, and you could not decipher the paper, and you imagine yourself to be incompetent, maybe, or you might be thinking that the paper is writing at a higher level or something. So this is a very common experience, and it is not only because you might be not having the skill set or the um, or the understanding on how to read papers, or even you might not have the technical know-how of the subject. In many cases, this is because the papers are poorly written. So uh, it is very common for someone to be skilled at something, at doing something, but not skilled at communicating uh, the same thing. This is because the art of doing thing and the art of communicating what you've done is quite different. So we shall be seeing that, and we'll be motivating that through examples. Um, and because of this, it becomes important that uh, we think about how we are going to communicate. So if we have done research, we have worked on a work for many months, then the natural urge is to describe everything and to describe it in the way that you actually went through the process. So that may be called a bottom up approach. But in contrast, in terms of writing, something else is to be preferred, and that is the top down approach. And this focuses on providing context at all places, and to talk of the big ideas first, the concrete ideas first, and then to delve into the details. Because although you might have discovered the big idea later on in your research, but for a new person, it is almost always easier to start with the big idea and then to delve into the details. This is known as a top down approach. And those of you who have studied computer networking would know of the famous book by Kuros and Ross, which is called Computer Networking, a Top Down Approach. And one reason for its popularity is that it takes the top down approach. So we should inshallah be covering this in the first mini lecture on our writing tips. In the second mini lecture, I shall be talking about flow and how, when we are writing, we need to connect all the links together. And this has to be done at multiple levels. So all of your sentences in a paragraph have to fit together. And also all of your paragraphs have to be weaved together in a section. And then those sections must all be connected. And in this way, you build a flow through your paper, which makes the job of the reader easy. So this is known as flow, and this is depicted here by a chain of links, in which even if one link was to be broken, the entire chain would be actually derailed. And this highlights the importance of structure. So oftentimes you find people, they may know many different things, but they don't know how to put all of them together in a way that makes sense to someone else. So you can compare this with a heap of bricks with a well constructed wall. So similarly, you may have many different ideas, and without structure, all of these ideas are just a heap of ideas. You need to somehow put these together in some sort of an optimal structure that helps in communicating the idea to the reader. The third mini lecture I'm going to talk about is about a related concept of coherence. So um, a paper that is having flow is something very good, but by itself, it does not necessarily mean that it will also be coherent. So when we are talking of coherent, we want it to be logical and consistent. These are just dictionary meaning of coherence. So I got these two dictionary meanings. The other meaning is that it has a quality of forming a unified whole. In other words, all of the ideas should be related to each other in some way, and there should be some thematic unity. Only then uh, you have a good chance of communicating your idea to the reader. In other words, if you have a document that is not coherent, then basically it will be very hard for you to communicate your message. And also, good science requires us to be for our arguments to be coherent. So I will talk about what this entails and some uh, positive things and some errors that people make when I get to the mini lecture on coherence. The fourth mini lecture would be about empathy. And this is, many people write of this as perhaps the most important element of writing well. In other words, many a times experts have what some people call the curse of knowledge. The curse of knowledge refers to the fact that once you know something, you immediately assume that the other person would also be knowing it. And then when you speak to that person, you might be using things that you might be assuming knowledge that the other person does not have, or you may be using some acronyms, or you may be speaking at a level which the other person would not be able to follow. So in this regard, Don Norman, who is a renowned design expert and an author of many design books, he talks about the fact that there are some similarities between a good designer and a good writer. And the prime similarity is that the most important similarity is that they have empathy. In other words, a well-designed object is one in which you take the user's perspective. Similarly, a good writer takes the perspective of the audience and then writes accordingly in a way that the reader can understand. Also, from Don Norman, there is another quote which highlights the importance of the next item on our list, which is having and following good design. So Don Norman says that you can think of the problem of writing something as something similar to designing something that people will find understandable and easy to use. Don Norman has many examples of objects that are not easy to use. He has a book called Design of Everyday Things. And he takes this perspective that if an object is not designed well, many people will use it incorrectly. Similarly, you need to have this empathy, and you also need to think of design so that you can understand the typical ways in which the reader may fail to get your message, and also the well-defined ways, the design patterns that exist, the conventions that exist that you can leverage to craft your paper accordingly and to communicate your message more clearly. Finally, there are so many books about writing that focus on style. So the classic example of such a book is the book that can be seen in the middle. This is a standard reference that is often assigned to students for honing their writing skills. This is a book by Professor Strunk and White. This is known as The Elements of Style. This is a very short book, and it's a very nice book for all students to read. It has some very nice, concise advice. This is not a large book. This would be just around 100 to 200 pages. And it also has many examples of good usage of style and some errors that people make. More recently, Steven Pinker has written a new book called The Sense of Style. The Thinking Person's Guide to Writing in the 21st Century. This is actually, in a way, uh, upgrading Strunk and White and describing writing practices and how to write with what he calls style, um, and how to write in the 21st century. There's also another book shown. This is Style Lessons in Clarity and Grace by Williams and his co-author Bishop. And there are, in fact, many other books as well. So during the course of these mini lectures, I will also be referring other books. So I would like to highlight that, for researchers, this is a lifelong skill that you hone over time, and you learn books and you observe people writing well, and you observe good thinking reflected in writing, because good writing is in fact good thinking. And many a times bad writing reflects bad thinking. So what are the good practices? What are the bad practices? You learn this over time, and no one can teach you this in just 1 hour. But what I'm trying to do is I will be giving you some basics which I've learned over the last decade or so. Alhamdulillah, I've published more than 100 papers. So I have experience writing many works and also supervising many students. So I will be highlighting some errors and I will be highlighting some pointers. So one purpose of doing this guest lecture is also to train my future students. So I'm also sharing the same tips with you. And inshallah, I hope you will find these useful. So these are some of the books that we shall refer. Strunk and White I've mentioned. There is a very good book called The Minto Pyramid Principle. I will be talking about this in part 1, which is the next part. I've talked about Steven Pinker's sense of style. And then there are a few presentations on writing well. So in a way, our presentation is also inspired by these works. The slide set that you see on the left hand side is by Derek Dreyer, and on the right hand side this is from Simon Peyton Jones from Microsoft Research Cambridge. These are all very famous, and you can find these lectures on YouTube as well. So I would advise, if you are interested in improving your writing, you should try to first of all see all of the lectures that I give, and just note down the various references, and over time, just as an investment in your own self, read these works, because it will help you improve your writing. And in many ways, writing well is an unfair advantage. If you get it, you can really benefit. Even if you have an average work, if you write it well and you write persuasively, many a times it can get accepted. But if you have even a very good idea, but if you write carelessly and you write in ways that are afflicted also by some thinking and writing errors, then the chances are that the reviewer would doubt even your research on the basis that you're not careful about your writing. So inshallah, this is a good investment to make. So with this, inshallah, I will be wrapping this intro part. I will be coming soon with part 1. If there are any questions, please note them down, and you can find my email online. And inshallah, you can send me your comments, suggestions on email, and I'll be happy to discuss further with you. So see you, inshallah, in the next lecture.